Ow, sorry, there was something in the way.
Did you say something in the way?
Wait, what?
No.
So, in my never-ending quest for relevancy, I decided to see this in the hopes that I'd get a video out of it. I can no longer just go to the cinema with a friend on one afternoon and have a nice time. It has to become content. If you want to make this sacrifice worth it, please subscribe, because at this current point, the Riddler has more subscribers than me, and I will not stand for that. So I kind of understood all perspectives going into this. I'm not a massive Batman fan. I've dipped my toe in and out of Batman media over the years. Obviously, the Adam West show is Kino. I've seen Mask of the Phantasm, as well as a few other animated ones. I did see the Dark Knight trilogy because I've been reliably informed that if I hadn't, that would be a crime against culture. I saw the appeal of the thing that was promised to us from the trailers. I saw why it spoke to some people, why it really resonated with them. But I also understand the people who were a little frustrated that with our third live-action Batman in a row, we're once again going dark, edgy, gritty, violent, sexy, deep voicey, angsty.
1, 2, 3, 4. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. Started living on the street. Haven't had enough to eat. And the struggle to make ends meet, but don't you worry. You're gonna die.
But as someone who's not a Batman fan, I've not had the obligation to watch everything in which there's a rich guy dressed like a pillock. So I'm not quite burnt out on this take yet. The main hurdle for me was whether this movie was going to accidentally make me laugh. Don't get me wrong, that first trailer, really good. But with some of the later ones, where we start to hear the guy talking, monologuing, it just seemed a bit much.
Fear is a tool, but when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call, it's a warning.
Pain is like coffee. I need it to keep my eyes open. I spend a lot of nights awake, guys. Crime never sleeps, and so neither do I. It's actually kind of medically worrying. I just want to go to bed, Alfred.
But for the most part, I wasn't laughing, so that's probably a good sign. I think JXE put it best. Somehow, there is a scene in which Bruce, with eyeliner and long dark hair, says to Alfred, "You are not my dad," and somehow that isn't cringy. Obviously, Mycroft didn't approve. It had cats in it. What about that thumbnail I so enticed you with? Well, if you're new to the channel, there's going to be a lot of that. I'm sorry. Suppose the main thing this has in common with Batman Begins, other than it's ostensibly the first in a trilogy, and sometimes we can't really understand what our main character is saying, then I suppose it would be all the monologues about fear. You've probably seen Just Right's video on Batman Begins. But to summarise, that film was about Batman's ideology towards fear, who it should be used against and to what end. And the conclusion that the movie reached overall was that his approach, out of all the philosophies we see in that movie, was best, because it was the only ideology left standing at the end. I got about halfway through before I wondered if this film was asking the question, what if fear is not enough? What happens if you're not able to make someone scared? What happens if fear turns you into a monster? Obviously, Batman talks about fear as a tool quite a bit, and the movie seems to be critiquing how overly reliant he is on that particular tool. What clicked for me was when Falcone was talking to Bruce about Thomas Wayne and his request for what to do with the reporter, put the fear of God into him, and if that wasn't enough. So is this film critiquing the conclusion that Batman Begins reached? As Just Right explains, Batman's ideology in that film is that using scare tactics on criminals for altruistic means is the right way to do this. Does Riddler in this movie fit that ideology? In some ways I would say yes. The ending kind of ruins that when he gets all biblical and tries to flood all of Gotham. Like, I guess that's one way to get rid of corruption, but God, at least build a boat first. See, his whole thing was unmasking the truth. He wasn't really trying to use fear as a means of control, necessarily. I do enjoy how this movie weaponizes moments that were meant to get you really hyped up in the marketing and the trailers, but were recontextualized and turned back on the protagonist, and by extension the audience. Like the I Am Vengeance really gets turned around as a critique of Bruce. And the red light that we saw all throughout the marketing turns up at the end through the flare, but this time, instead of being associated with the edgy fun that we were expecting, it gets turned into something that's associated with hope. Batman's literally leading people out of the darkness. Like, the story's clearly trying to be something of a sucker punch, as Elizabeth Sandifer would put it. It lets us enjoy the brutal Bat, but then pulls the rug out from under us and critiques him, and by extension the audience, for enjoying this kind of thing in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, mostly an outsider to Batman stuff. We seem to be telling a lot of stories about Batman at the end of his career, where he's cynical and desperate and dangerous, and he's getting more violent. Or we're telling stories about Batman at the start of his career, where he's still learning how to do things, he's full of anger, he's more violent. Uncoincidentally, they're both points in Batman's career in which Frank Miller has written for the character. It just feels a little bit like we're trying to have our salty tear-stained cake and eat it to an extent. We're always putting Batman in a position where we're going to have to critique him, otherwise it just looks like we're indulging in him being violent. There's always a danger in engaging in the kind of stuff you're critiquing. But we know that the darker take on this character is what sells the most, and it's what is the most easily marketable. So I don't think this is an exorcism of the thing it's critiquing Batman for, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe all the references to Batman Begins is to just point out the stuff that we missed in that film. I don't remember this being a problem in Batman Begins. I do remember the character being a source of hope.
I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.
But maybe the point isn't really a critique of it, but more just pointing to Batman Begins and going, here's the thing that you've been missing since then. I'm kind of hoping that the franchise going forward tries to do what the Daniel Craig Bond movies did. Start off quite serious, quite stripped down, and then slowly get wackier and wackier. But what's left? Oh, Batman movies want to get political again? Oh yeah, keep getting political, Batman, you're so good at it. This movie kind of vilifies the people who it ostensibly is agreeing with, but that's a problem with a lot of superhero stuff at the moment. In particular, I'd really encourage you to watch Jesse Gender's video on the politics of this Batman, you know, where it goes right, where it goes wrong. Batman is kind of like Doctor Who in a way.
You thought I could go one video without mentioning it, didn't ya?
Both of them try to pursue social justice, but they've been, even out of their control, placed in positions of power and privilege that make it kind of hard to tell certain stories. Like, Batman especially struggles when the real problem of a story is rich, white men in positions of power, wealth and influence. You know, people like him.
The Dark Knight Rises is complete bollocks.
So any story that critiques them is going to have to critique him in at least some manner. And how he reacts to it and what he does is going to be very important. To that end, the big change I would make, I don't think he should have interfered when Selina wanted to kill Falcone. I know Batman's kind of defined by his no-killing rule, but as Batman Begins stated,
But I don't have to save you.
Batman talks about the right way of doing things. Selina quite rightly points out that the right way of doing things doesn't work here. The system doesn't work. So what incentive is there for Selina to do things the right way? One of the things Elizabeth Sandifer praised about the Doctor Who story, The Mutants, is that the Doctor stands by and lets Kai kill the Marshal in that story, as if to finally admit that he doesn't have any right to comment on what's going on here. And I kind of think something similar should have happened here. Or if someone else other than Bruce could have been the one to persuade Selina not to do it. Well, I think that sums things up nicely. I don't really have an ending planned for this video, so how about a picture of the Joker? That'll satisfy you.